Amazing CEO exposes billionaire family's humiliation. Discover how she transformed a 900 men on a deal. Sarah Reynolds stood in her sleek office, overlooking the small Texas town she had fought so hard to rise above. The stakes were towering, and her heart raced, not with excitement, but with a tightening knot of dread. A billion-dollar deal with the Torres family loomed ahead. The Torreses, local magnates with an iron grip on the community, had a notorious reputation for squeezing the life out of those who tried to flourish. Memories of her mother's weary face flickered in her mind, a reminder of the sacrifices made in a cramped apartment filled with dreams bigger than their meager reality. Now, armed with a tech startup that had grown from late-night brainstorming fears, she was on the brink of a fortune. But as her fingers brushed over the sleek surface of the mahogany conference table, a sense of unease settled in her gut. Was she about to betray everything her mother had fought for? The questions gnawed at her spirit. Could she stand by and strike a deal with those who thrived on the suffering of hard-working families? "Don't let them push you down," she echoed, recalling her mother's words, but self-doubt surged relentlessly. The polished suits around her had their motives, and they were decidedly different from her own. With each word exchanged in the high-stakes meetings, the air thickened with a tension that felt almost tangible. Sarah's focus narrowed, the faces around her blurring as she fought to keep her composure amidst their calculating smiles. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue." A palpable silence fell in the room, shadows of mistrust lurking behind false smiles. Sarah could almost feel her heartbeat echoing against the pristine walls, the urgency of the deal growing heavier. The sight of their lawyer flipping through stacks of contracts made her stomach churn. This was no longer just business. It felt like stepping into her mother's shoes once more, re-experiencing the fears of abandonment and the haunting sting of betrayal. With the Torres' PR machine twisting narratives like a knife in her back, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of resistance. Each unjust rumor felt like a personal affront, reminding her of the faces of families who had suffered at the hands of greedy corporations. She could not let their pursuit of wealth shatter the principles instilled in her over the years. The tension in her chest built, an almost suffocating urge to scream, to confront them with what was true, yet fear took root, twisting any hope of action into a tangled mass of anxiety. Just as she gathered strength, a charismatic investor with his own agenda approached her with promises of support. But at what cost? Secrets simmered beneath his polished exterior, and she questioned whose loyalty would waver first, theirs or hers. Torn between ambition and her moral foundation, she felt a chilling weight of expectations settle on her shoulders. The unaired truth dashed in her mind, mingling with the firm resolve she had nurtured. At the charity gala, she would face the Torres family head-on to unveil their greed, a chance to reclaim her own identity while seeking justice for those who had been overlooked. The clock ticked down, and as she grasped the microphone, her pulse quickened, a tightly wound spring ready to unleash her message. But then, an unexpected figure stepped into view, redirecting the attention of the room and locking eyes with her. An icy shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She realized she wasn't just fighting for her startup. This was about everything she had ever fought against and feared. Her breath caught, leaving the audience, including herself, poised in suspense as the line between hope and despair blurred on the threshold of a revelation that could change everything forever. The figure stepping into view was none other than Luis Torres, the heir to the empire that had instilled fear into the hearts of many. His golden charm and easy smile could disarm almost anyone, but Sarah felt no comfort in his presence. It was a calculated move on his part, a show of force meant to intimidate just as much as it was intended to charm. She swallowed hard. Her resolve faltered for an instant under the weight of his poised confidence. "Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice rich and smooth, cutting through the tension in the room like warm butter. She forced herself to maintain eye contact, to not show the storm brewing within. "You're making waves. I admire your spirit." She could hear the undertones of condescension masking flattery. "Is that what you admire, Luis? My spirit, or is it just the potential of taking what's mine?" His smile briefly faltered, revealing a flicker of irritation beneath the surface. Yet Sarah kept her tone steady, feeling the warmth of her mother's support behind her as she pushed against the uncertainty. "It's all in good faith. We're all businessmen here, right?" he replied, his mirth returning. "Business should be more than just profit margins. There are lives at stake," she shot back, the words tasting bitter but freeing. Uncertainty still clung to her, but the mention of their troubled past lent her strength. The audience had shifted their focus to the exchange. Curiosity piqued. They were watching a first-hand revelation, a stark contrast built upon societal values, and Sarah was tethered to something greater than her ambition. The questions loomed over her instead. Would she stand her ground, or would she succumb to the seduction of power and wealth? Luis leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming with something far from sincerity. "I think you misunderstand. Control needs strength. You're at a crossroads, Sarah. I can help you take that leap. You'll find that it's often easier to align than to resist." She felt a surge of anger rise within her, an empowering fire against those who commodified struggle. The threat his words posed was no longer abstract. It was a stark confrontation of everything she feared. The line separating their worldviews was clearer than ever, an invisible battleground that could tear her apart. Sarah inhaled deeply, grounding herself. The weight of her decisions pressed heavy, but she was unwilling to compromise her values. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in playing the games you and your family play. I've built my company on integrity, not manipulation." The atmosphere morphed, tension sharpening into focus. Luis's eyes narrowed, calculating her response as she moved away from their talk. The connection jolted her deeper, each word echoing a commitment to her past and a pledge to those who suffered under the Torres regime. Gathering strength, Sarah took her place back on the stage and gripped the microphone firmly. She thought of the families affected, her voice rising above the whispers. "I'm here to speak for those silenced, to expose the truth behind the glossy facade." She prepared to share every detail she had uncovered, exposing the injustices perpetuated by greed, masquerading as progress. But the uncertainty prickled underneath her confidence once again. What lay beneath her carefully crafted speech and bold stance? Even as she confronted the shadows, she couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that clung to her. Just as she prepared to unleash the torrent of truth, the lights flickered off, a technical failure plunging the room into darkness. Panic rippled through the audience, but Sarah felt the unsettling calm beneath it all. This chaos could be the distraction she needed, or the endgame for her ambitions. A disembodied voice echoed through the room, creating a palpable anxiety as shadows shifted around her. Now, in the silence, she sensed a new threat lurking, and she wasn't ready to uncover what it meant. The question weighed heavily. Would she emerge from the shadows unscathed, or would the darkness swallow her whole? As the darkness enveloped her, Sarah's heart raced. The familiarity of fear clawed at her insides, a visceral reminder of moments that had marked her life. But in that void, she felt a flicker of clarity. This was more than a mere technical failure. It was an invitation to confront her deeper anxieties. The pitch-black stage was not just a setting, it resonated with the uncertainty she had been grappling with in her journey as an entrepreneur. The murmurs of confusion from the crowd swirled around her, an orchestra of unease that mirrored her own internal turmoil. She took a moment to steady her breath, recalling her purpose and the promise she had made to herself. There was strength in vulnerability, but she had yet to fully embrace that truth. Fumbling for her phone, she flicked on the flashlight app. A beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the faces peering up into the void. Fear and intrigue mingled in their wide eyes, and for a moment the world felt eerily still. She understood then that this wasn't just about illuminating the truth behind Torres. This was about shining a light on her own capability, her own strength. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steadying as the light flickered across their anxious faces. "I know the darkness can be unsettling, but sometimes it is in shadow that we find the courage to confront our fears head-on." Confidence swelled within her. She was no longer just Sarah, a businesswoman on the brink. She was a force in her own right, willing to navigate any darkness that threatened to consume her. She recalled the stories of the families affected by Torres's empire, who had been forced into silence. They were her motivation, the reason she stood here today. The flickering light provided flickers of hope, illuminating not just the audience, but the truths begging to be uncovered. "Tonight," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "we stand at a crossroads, not just in this room, but in our lives. We must choose between complicity and truth, and I choose to reveal the truth." As she spoke, she could feel the anxiety from earlier dissipating, replaced by a resolute energy. Each word served to solidify her mission, casting away the fear that had held her captive. Amidst the darkness, she spotted a silhouette moving at the edge of the stage, a form she recognized, Luis. The sight of him ignited memories of their last confrontation, yet this time she felt different. Instead of intimidation, a surge of determination washed over her. He had tried to play with her emotions, but now Sarah was determined not to play the victim to his games. "Luis!" she shouted, her voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. "You call this business, but it is not merely transactions. You are selling lives. Do you think you can hide behind the shadows of your wealth forever?" The tension charged the atmosphere, and she could feel the collective breath held by the audience. Luis stepped forward into the beam of her light, a confidence restored, but she could see the crack in his facade. He was as uneasy as she felt strong, but this was her moment, the moment she had worked toward, confronting not only her adversary but also the parts of herself she had long neglected. As the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room, she saw the faces of her peers, her supporters. With their eyes fixed on her, she realized the path ahead was not just about confronting Luis, but also about embracing her identity, her leadership. As the lights brightened, illuminating the stage like a spotlight on her aspirations, the next question loomed large in her mind. How far was she willing to go to ensure the truth triumphed over power? And what sacrifices would she have to make along the way? The air crackled with tension as Sarah faced Luis, the palpable weight of the moment intensifying her awareness. The room felt alive, each heartbeat resonating as a reminder of the stakes she was confronting. Not just the truth of Torres's dealings, but the truths buried deep within herself. This wasn't merely a confrontation, it was an awakening. In that instant of clarity, she recognized the emotional struggle that had always held her back. She had spent her life trying to fit into a mold that didn't resonate with her true self, aligning with what she thought others expected of her. The power dynamics inherent in her relationship with Luis were a reflection of her own undervaluation. No longer. The fear had transformed into an unquenchable thirst for authenticity. When Luis stepped into the light, that familiar arrogance radiated from him, but now the way she perceived it altered. He was a survivor of the brutal world of corporate warfare, wielding influence with little regard for the human cost. But today, she wouldn't back down. This fight wasn't solely about confronting him, it was about dismantling the lies she had accepted about her own worth. "Your games are over," she declared, stepping forward with conviction. People often hid behind their wealth, their influence, but she had the truth on her side, and it provided her a sense of empowerment she had previously overlooked. Luis smirked, as though dismissing her stance, but beneath that facade she sensed doubt, a tremor in his armor. That glimmer of self-doubt invigorated Sarah. The revelation that he was not unassailable shifted the power dynamic in ways she had never considered. She started to breathe deeply, channeling this revelation into her thoughts and actions. "People matter," she continued, her words echoing like the notes of a well-rehearsed symphony. "Your empire is built on the backs of the vulnerable, and you can't silence them forever." Each word resonated with oddly comforting echoes from personal anecdotes shared by those she had previously dismissed as background noise. She could see the ripple of recognition in her audience as they began to connect the dots. This was about more than profit margins or quarterly earnings. It was about the lives entangled in the web of corporate greed. She harnessed that realization, honing it into a laser-like focus. Every minute she spent on stage solidified her clarity of purpose. She had not just prepared to confront Luis and his empire, but also to embrace the entrepreneur she had always aspired to become. There was a strength in vulnerability that resonated across the room, compelling her peers and allies to chime in. Whispers of support emerged, and they rallied against the shadows of complacency that had stifled their resolve. Yet as the glimmer of support from her peers fed her courage, a nagging doubt simmered at the back of her mind. What would this fight demand of her? Would the truth extract a price she wasn't ready to pay? The tantalizing thrill of potential lingered in the backdrop of her thoughts, and she understood this was only the beginning. As the energy in the room swelled, so did the unease that came with clarity. Each advancement she sought would require sacrifice. Amidst this swelling momentum, she confronted the practical implications. Could she risk everything to dismantle the growing tide determining her success? Her heartbeat quickened with resolve as she scanned the faces of her supporters, gathering their strength like a shield. This was more than a fight against Torres. It was a complete transformation, a redefinition of her purpose. What would she need to surrender, to seize victory and reaffirm her values? The flood of questions ignited within her, demanding answers. Was she prepared not just to expose the truth, but to step fully into the spotlight of her own narrative? The moment of realization hit hard. The confrontation with Luis was only the beginning. The path ahead gleamed with infinite possibilities, yet uncertainty loomed over her journey. Could she navigate the treacherous waters of betrayal and ambition without losing herself in the process? As the audience erupted into applause, a new thought overshone her moment of triumph. What kinds of alliances would she forge to ensure the truth was not just her own, but a shared reality with those willing to stand with her? The applause faded to an echo in Sarah's ears, replaced by a near-deafening silence that pulsed with her unease. Each handclap was a reminder of the weight now resting on her shoulders. She was no longer a mere observer in this cutthroat industry. She had stepped into a role that demanded courage, grit, and a level of commitment that she had never fully considered before. The familiar shoulders of responsibility hovered over her, heavy and pressing. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Sarah found herself grappling with a wave of conflicting emotions, a potent cocktail of elation, fear, and an urgent call to action. The chants of her supporters echoed in her thoughts, but as their voices faded, the noise of self-doubt began to creep in. What if this newfound support was fleeting? Was she truly equipped for the relentless battle that lay ahead? As she exited the stage, the vibrant energy of her speech still alive in the atmosphere, she was met by her closest ally, Jamie. Instinctively, Sarah turned to her for validation. "Did I go too far?" she questioned, realizing the impact of her words was greater than she had anticipated. "No," Jamie replied, her eyes filled with pride. "You did what needed to be done. People are listening. They want someone like you to lead." The encouraging words were a balm, but Sarah wrestled internally with the implications. Leading meant charting the course for others, and it was a role she had long avoided. "I know, but—" Sarah started, struggling to find the right words. "No buts." Jamie's voice was firm, unyielding. "This is your moment. Think of all the lives at stake. You have the chance to change things. Would you rather stay silent?" Silence. It loomed dangerously close to Sarah, ready to swallow her resolve. In that moment, she recognized the fork in the road before her. She could retreat into the shadows of self-doubt or embrace the uncertainty that came with stepping into a leadership role. She had spent too long hiding. Now was the time to stand tall. As they walked through the gathering crowd, Sarah observed the faces of her peers. Each moment shared during the spotlight felt like a piece of a grand puzzle clicking into place. The connections they'd forged now had the power to shift the prevailing narrative. She could feel the tangible shift in the air, a collective desire for authenticity sparking amidst a sea of ambition. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through her reverie. "Do you really think they'll follow you?" It was Miguel, an executive not accustomed to sharing power. His challenge was an affront, designed to intimidate rather than elevate. "Why shouldn't they?" Sarah replied, her voice steadying. "People want transparency. They want to know someone cares. I'm done playing by your rules." Silence fell again, but this time it was different. It was charged with tension, a standoff that mirrored the internal struggle within her. Miguel's eyes narrowed, assessing her as if searching for the chinks in her armor. But somewhere deep inside, Sarah felt a flicker of something unyielding, a belief in her vision that pulsed stronger than her lingering uncertainty. As she stood there confronting Miguel, the room around her buzzed with conversation, the energy a palpable reflection of anticipation. Instead of letting dread diffuse her resolve, she drew strength from the moment. What if confronting one opponent was merely the prelude to confronting many? What battles lay ahead, beyond the immediate? With a newfound determination, she made a silent pledge to herself. She would not only expose the darkness she felt in the corporate sphere, but also inspire others to rise beside her. The path wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to walk. In the distance, she glimpsed an opportunity, a potential alliance with one of the more experimental startups present, a venture that aligned perfectly with her vision for ethical business practice. Another opportunity was brewing, and with it, the potential for change. Real change required real sacrifice, and she had no intention of waving a white flag. As her gaze returned to Miguel, she felt a profound shift within. The stakes had just been raised. Tomorrow would demand not just her words, but also actionable steps. She would lay the groundwork for a revolution, not just in her own company, but within the industry itself. The question now loomed, heavy and clear. Who would stand beside her in this endeavor? Would the fragile alliances she was beginning to forge hold against the turbulence that was sure to come? As she prepared to navigate this tumultuous new terrain, she realized the fight had just begun. The raw energy of the moment ignited her resolve. Yet there was another thought, waiting at the back of her mind. A trepidation about how far she was willing to go for the truth. Would her pursuit of authenticity lead her to find allies or further isolation? The moment came when she would need to decide, and with each passing second the tension in her heart grew thicker. Would she have the courage to act on her convictions? The following morning, Sarah awoke with her heart racing, the weight of the previous day's encounter settling more significantly on her chest. As dawn crept through the window, illuminating her small apartment with soft golden light. She found herself staring at the ceiling, contemplating the path diverged from mere participation to transformative leadership. The very thought of it sent waves of anxiety through her. She could envision the strategies and dialogue necessary to support her case, yet self-doubt fluttered incessantly at the corners of her thoughts. While she had stood up to Miguel, what lay ahead felt infinitely more daunting. She needed a plan, something concrete she could act upon. Ideas bubbled in her mind, competing for attention, but it was the need for accountability that intensified her focus. Her decision to approach the startup she had spotted from the stage hummed in her memory. They were known for their innovative strategies and ethical practices. If she could align with them, she could stretch her influence beyond the walls of her own company. But the thought of pitching her imperfect vision to a group hailed for their forward thinking proved paralyzing. What if they rejected her? What if Miguel had already poisoned their perception of her? With a deep breath, Sarah slid out of bed and moved to her small kitchen. Making a cup of coffee, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This could be her opportunity to prove not just to Miguel, but to everyone, and most importantly to herself, that she was capable of formidable change. Fueled by caffeine, she pulled out her laptop, hitting the keys with a fervor that mirrored her pulse. An email began to take shape, outlining her vision and desire to partner. The words flowed nearly as fast as her thoughts, until she stumbled on an unexpected pause. She had always second-guessed her assertions, questioning her authority and expertise, but today she didn't want to yield to self-doubt. With each paragraph, she reminded herself of the energy she had felt while speaking. The affirmation from the crowd still echoed in her mind, providing a cushion against the impending fear of rejection. After sending the email, adrenaline coursed through her. Perhaps it wasn't the moment she had planned for, but it was a step towards where she aspired to be, leading with purpose and integrity. But the question of Miguel loomed larger than before. She could already imagine the glaring skepticism and dismissive smirk that would cross his face if he discovered her outreach was successful. Determined not to let his energy taint her resolve, Sarah decided to confront him directly. She'd request a meeting, ready to discuss their future strategies within the firm. Preparing herself for what she'd say, she visualized dissecting his objections with ethical reasoning and compelling data. This would be the engagement that defined her leadership. An hour later, she confidently entered the corporate office, equipped with a clear objective to re-establish the narrative. As she arrived at Miguel's office, apprehension wormed its way back in. She paused, her hand hovering over the doorknob, allowing her emotions to coalesce. When she finally stepped inside, she presented herself with the authority she had vowed to claim. "Miguel," she stated forthright, "we need to talk about changes that could reshape our direction in a more positive light." The look on his face was a mixture of surprise and intrigue, but before she could gauge his reaction, she forged ahead. Each point was crafted to emphasize unity, progress, and shared success. This wasn't solely about her, it was about the company's future. But as her voice intensified, so did the tension. Miguel abruptly interrupted, dismissing her proposals as naive. "You really think they'll follow you? You think a few fast words will change minds?" The challenge hung between them like an anchor weighing her down, forcing her to confront the haunting question again. This time, she faced him with the full awareness of what she would lose if she failed. But internal conviction screamed back, "No, Miguel, this isn't about me. It's about the direction we take together." Just as she thought she was gaining ground, a colleague passed by, overhearing their exchange. His eyes flicked between the two of them. She realized her struggle for validation was now public. The stakes were no longer personal, they were professional. Would she maintain her composure when the vulnerability of failure was laid bare before an audience? In the wake of that realization, Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. An unsettling mix of exhilaration and anxiety coursed through her. The risk had multiplied, and suddenly she was on the precipice of something larger. This moment would define her. She was ready for whatever it took. But what if her confrontation triggered a chain reaction, leading to unforeseen challenges she wasn't prepared for? Which path would she need to navigate next, now caught in the snare of Miguel's scrutiny and her colleagues' furtive glances? The atmosphere in Miguel's office became thick with unspoken tension. Sarah resisted the impulse to retreat, knowing it was crucial to stand her ground. She had done her homework, and deep down she understood the potential implications of her proposals. The room felt smaller, a pressure cooker for the escalating conflict, but she pinpointed the importance of clarity. She leaned into the discomfort, the penetrating gaze of her colleague still lingering in her peripheral vision. "Miguel," she continued, steadying herself, "I believe the future of our company hinges on adaptation and innovation. Our competitors are moving swiftly towards models that prioritize ethical practices and sustainable initiatives. Trends indicate that clients are gravitating more towards brands they can trust." Her words tumbled out, each carrying weight, an attempt to pierce through his skepticism. He folded his arms, casting a long shadow of doubt. Sustainability? Those are just buzzwords. This industry is about profit, not telling a feel-good story. You're in over your head if you think you can change the fabric of our company with light ideals, he retorted, his tone condescending. The dismissiveness pierced her, but she refused to let it deflate her resolve. A flicker of defiance surged through her, invigorating her conviction. Sarah contemplated her next move, reflecting on what made her proposals compelling beyond mere emotion: data. Actually, Miguel, the data shows that companies who implement ethical practices see an average of 15% growth in customer loyalty. That could translate into significant revenue, particularly in our sector. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but was it an opening or merely astonishment? The moment held a fragile thread, and she could feel her heart pound in synchronization with the chatter outside the office. She caught the eye of her colleague, who stood frozen, interested yet unsure. This felt dangerously like a performance, an exposure of vulnerability mixed with courage that left no room for weakness. It would either break her or build her up. "And what do you suggest?" he asked, skepticism still woven into his words. A dialogue. She had opened a dialogue, and now she needed to frame her vision in a way that painted collaboration, not confrontation. "What if we pilot a program focused on sustainable practices? Just a small initiative, but one that can serve as a case study for larger-scale implementation. If it succeeds, it could reshape our image and increase our market share." For a moment, a silence engulfed the room. She hadn't anticipated the pause. It was a moment for reflection, or perhaps assessment. Was he really considering her proposal, or simply plotting his next critique? Sarah felt as if everything hinged on this fleeting breath of time. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she awaited his response. "Let me get this straight," he replied, his tone now laced with mockery. "You want to risk company resources on a speculative project with no guaranteed ROI?" "Yes," she replied, a new intensity igniting her spirit. "It's a risk worth taking for the future of our company. It's about much more than profit margins. It's about leadership, about setting a standard for the market." Their exchange electrified the atmosphere, a collision of ideas and egos. She had never seen this side of herself, bold, articulate and resolute, challenging someone at this level of authority. But uncertainty still clawed at her insides. Would this fierce conviction be enough to foster change? As the discussion unfolded, she began to notice the sideways glances exchanged among her colleagues outside the office. They were watching, perhaps betting on the outcome. The room crackled with an energy that felt like both support and scrutiny. Would they see her as a trailblazer or a fool? Their expectations would cultivate the stakes even higher, leaving no margin for error. Just as she started to sense confidence flourish within her, Miguel pushed back harder, his eyes narrowing. You think they'll follow you just because you're shouting about ethics? Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen with just a wish and a prayer. The doubt he perpetuated clung to the air, stifling her fervor. Yet she faced him, unyielding. It depends on whether we're willing to lead, Miguel, to embrace change instead of fighting it. In that moment, Sarah realized that regardless of what outcome lay ahead, she was already a step closer to who she wanted to be, a leader unafraid to voice her truth, constructing a space for her ideas to grow. But as the discussion reached a boiling point, a text buzzed on her phone, the screen lighting up with an unexpected message from the startup she had pitched to. What would it reveal? Would it offer her a lifeline or plunge her deeper into uncertainty? Sarah's heart raced as she glanced down at her phone, the vibrant screen contrasting sharply against the somber tension in the office. The startup had replied. Was it good news or another setback? With a determined inhale, she stifled the trepidation wrapping around her mind. Not now. She was in the cockpit of a critical flight and couldn't afford to get distracted. Maintaining her gaze on Miguel, she allowed the phone to rest silently in her lap, its secrets lingering for a moment longer. This isn't just about following trends, she asserted, her voice steady despite the tempest inside. It's about rewriting the narrative. We have the opportunity to lead from the front. Lead? Miguel's scoff barely concealed his disdain. You act like you're the captain steering a ship through rough seas. The reality is, we're not on the crest of a wave. We're anchored miles away from shore. A flicker of doubt rumbled within her, but she didn't give it a foothold. Her proposition was more than a sales pitch. It was a call to arms, resonating with a conviction she hadn't fully considered until now. Every company that succeeded faced adversity. We can't shrink back when there's a storm. We need to adapt. Our survival depends on evolving with the market. A moment of contemplation danced across Miguel's face. Suddenly, he leaned forward, his expression shifting into something sharper. You're painting a grand picture with beautiful words, but have you thought through the practicalities? What happens if this project fails? That question loomed, a dark cloud threatening to overshadow her budding confidence. But as she considered his challenge, something within her clicked. Failing is a part of success, Miguel. It's how we learn and grow. If we never take a chance, we're ensuring we'll stay stagnant. Her voice had drawn the attention of those waiting outside the office, a multitude of ears straining for fragments of the unfolding confrontation. It was dizzying knowing they were focused on her, and yet that energy lit a blaze of confidence within her. But then his next words landed like cold steel. And if the stakes don't justify the risk? Are you willing to gamble not just your reputation but the livelihoods of everyone who depends on this company? The implication settled heavily. Miguel wasn't merely contesting her proposal, he was forcing her to confront her very motivations and the ramifications of her ambitions. Her mind raced. The decisions of today could alter the fabric of their future, not just for her, but for the entire team. It weighed on her like an anchor, yet a flicker of resilience sparked in the depths of her thoughts. Yes, she replied finally, each syllable bursting forth with newfound clarity, because I believe it's worth it. I'd rather take the risk and be part of a transformative journey than cling to outdated models for the sake of comfort. His eyes narrowed, perhaps assessing the depth of her resolve. The atmosphere shifted, the air tingled with anticipation. Here was the defining moment she never expected to encounter so soon. A revelation that transcended the immediate conflict. She was learning not just about persistence, but about harnessing her voice as a tool for leadership, understanding that oftentimes the greatest risk was indecision. Just then, a powerful chime rang through the room, drawing their attention to her phone once more. This time she didn't hesitate. She unlocked her device, reading the message that had the potential to reshape her path. It was an offer, an opportunity that spelled not just growth for her plans, but a substantial financial backing for the startup she had recognized as pivotal. The thought rushed through her. Would Miguel support her decision if they brought this idea to fruition? "I'm not finished," she stated, looking resolutely at him, the urgency of the moment burning bright. "This is only the beginning, Miguel. Let's step beyond the safety net and into a greater future." His eyes gleamed with a mixture of challenge and intrigue, and suddenly she didn't feel like just an employee. She was a player on the field, ready to make her move. What would Miguel say to the latest developments? Could this chance truly set their trajectory towards something remarkable? As her colleagues awaited, breath caught in their throats, the world outside the office dimmed, focusing solely on the pivotal second that could swing either way. Whatever uncertainty lingered was drowned out by the roar of her growing determination, standing before the precipice of a leap into the unknown. Next step, how to convince Miguel to embrace change, not just with words, but actions that would solidify her position as not only a contender, but a leader. Would he see the opportunity ahead, or continue to resist? The moment stretched, electric and heavy. Sarah felt the weight of her colleagues' gazes, a palpable blend of skepticism and hope hanging in the air. She knew that this conversation was about more than just business strategy. It was about her own evolution as a leader, her chance to carve out a space for herself in a world where every misstep could lead to ruin. "Let's talk numbers," Miguel said, cutting through her thoughts as he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His tone was cool, analytical. "We're looking at a significant investment without a clear guarantee. What can you offer that would justify taking this leap?" Those words sparked a fire within her. "What I can offer is vision," she replied, her confidence blooming in the wake of his challenge. "This isn't just another project, Miguel. It's a strategic pivot that can position us not just to survive but to thrive. We can be innovators in a field that's yearning for disruption." For a brief moment, she saw a flicker of interest in his eyes, but it was quickly sealed off behind a mask of skepticism. Sarah knew she had to dig deeper, not just to apprise him of the proposal, but to reveal the emotional core of what drove her passion for this venture. Think of it like an athlete on the brink. You either play it safe and never test your limits, or you push through the barriers and forge your own path. She continued, "Allowing fear to dictate our choices will only lead to regression. I want to challenge the status quo, not only for myself, but for this entire team, our futures along with it." His gaze turned steely, and she felt the firm boundaries of his skepticism threatening to swallow her resolve. Was this the moment where her ambition would clash against a wall of traditionalism? "I appreciate the metaphor," he replied slowly. "But we are not athletes. We're running a business. Those who gamble with their livelihoods often end up regretting it." Her heart tightened briefly. The very thought of their livelihoods hung precariously in the balance, and she knew she had to steer her next words with careful precision. But refusing to take any risk means we may never grow at all. Sarah paused, searching for the right example. "You once told me about your first venture, Miguel. You took a huge risk that led to unprecedented growth. You understood that the greatest losses could lead to magnificent gains." Her voice gained momentum, fueled by the shared history of shared aspirations. "If I'm asking us to leap, I promise to be there every step of the way, building this out collaboratively. I might be new to taking the reins, but my commitment is resolute." Each word resonated in her stomach, an irrefutable claim to her dedication. Did she truly believe her own rhetoric, or was this bravado? Would this moment define her trajectory forever? Doubt clawed at her, but she pushed through it. She could see the tension in his shoulders loosening ever so slightly. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had lit the kindling of possibility. "What does this look like in practical terms?" Miguel asked, the coldness in his voice thawing just enough for Sarah to sense a crack in his defenses. "In terms of execution, the investment will allow us to innovate our approach to market strategies. We can harness trending insights and drive customer engagement by refining what we offer," she explained, urgency and excitement reclaiming her tone. "We will set benchmarks and continuously evaluate our progress, ensuring we adapt to any shifts." "Benchmarks and metrics are manageable," he allowed, still cautious. "But will your vision resonate with the board? They're not so easily swayed." A flicker of fear darted through her, but she quelled it. "That conversation starts today with you, Miguel. If I can present a united front with your support, we show the board we are ready to undertake bold steps." The weight of her request settled in the air, a pivotal crossroads of sorts. The validation she sought now rested in his hands. Would he choose to ally with her on this chapter of transformation, or would the door remain locked against her ambitions? As silence enveloped them, Sarah's mind raced with potential scenarios, each one tinged with uncertainty, but also the thrill of possibility. She could almost hear the clock ticking, each second amplifying the stakes of the moment, a crucible in which her leadership would be forged. "Okay," Miguel said finally, his voice steady but laced with seriousness. "I'll consider your proposal. But understand, I need more than just passion. You need to prepare a solid plan to present to the board." Her heart surged with a mix of relief and determination. It wasn't full endorsement, but it was an opening. "I'll start immediately," she assured him, buoyed by renewed purpose. "Together we can create a compelling narrative, one that says we're not just interested in maintaining the status quo, but redefining it." For the first time, she felt the fierce pulse of leadership resonate within her, an empowerment she had never quite embraced before. But as she prepared to exit the room, a subtle chill crept through her thoughts, a warning that winning was only the start. Convincing the board would demand everything she had, and more. Yet the unshakable knowledge coursing through her was tantalizing. If they could secure this investment, they would rewrite their story together, transcending the limits of what they had known. But first, she had to navigate the storm that lay ahead. Would the board see her vision with the same clarity as she did, or would her ambitious steps lead her to face yet another insurmountable obstacle? Sarah Reynolds stood confidently in the boardroom, a stark contrast to the doubting entrepreneur she had once been. Today, she was not just presenting ideas, she was defending her vision for a brighter, more ethical future for the company, and in doing so, for herself. The heavy oak table shone beneath the overhead lights, echoing the significance of the meeting yet to unfold. The faces around her, a mix of skepticism and curiosity, were sharply defined against the backdrop of corporate convention. Miguel leaned back, his posture signaling the stakes were higher than ever. For weeks, Sarah had labored meticulously over her pitch, transforming the intangible spark of a new strategy into a concrete proposal. "You've all seen the rising demand for ethical businesses," she began, her voice steady and resonant. "This isn't just a trend, it is a paradigm shift that we cannot afford to ignore any longer." She glanced at Miguel, whose earlier resistance now fed her fire. Turning toward the rest of the board, she caught the eye of each member, gauging their thoughts as she highlighted the market data that supported her analysis. As she navigated through her slides, Sarah felt the chatter of uncertainty in the room begin to dissolve. She detailed the sustainable shifts that competitors were making, showing how they were capturing market share as clientele demanded more accountability. The urge to revert to familiar comforts gnawed at the board, yet her unwavering conviction pierced through that noise, inching the board toward agreement. With every statistic she cited and every initiative she outlined, Sarah demonstrated not just her knowledge, but an undeniable transformation inside herself. She was no longer the timid soldier in the old battles. She was on the offense, a strategist willing to confront both the company's past and its potential future. The push for transformation had become her personal battle for being seen, for being heard. As she unveiled the projected outcomes of their new strategy, her confidence blossomed further. Suddenly Miguel interjected, "But how can we ensure that these changes won't compromise our current financial stability? There are a lot of risks." Sarah felt the tension thicken. However, she was prepared for this. The very notion that progress is incompatible with stability is a fallacy, she replied, her conviction unwavering. Investments in sustainability will drive customer loyalty, which is worth far more than short-term gains. It's about building a legacy. Miguel's eyes narrowed, watching her intently, but Sarah saw a glimmer of respect in his gaze. The board remained quiet, handing her back power she hadn't realized she had reclaimed. Every question that circulated grew sharper, deeper. They cut into the core of their values and their understanding of success. Sarah met each with a calculated response that echoed her own evolution. For the first time, she was advocating not only for an initiative, but for a change in corporate culture defined by values she had learned from childhood: transparency, integrity, and responsibility. At last, after an exchange of lively discussion, a murmur spread through the boardroom. Sarah felt the change swirling in the air, electrifying her sense of purpose. The board was beginning to reconcile theirs and her vision. As the final vote was cast, Sarah held her breath, an exciting dread ebbing in the pit of her stomach. When Miguel announced the outcome, elation washed over her like a tide. "The proposal has passed. Let's begin implementing the project starting next quarter." Overwhelmed by a surge of fulfillment, Sarah absorbed every moment. Recognition, like sunlight breaking through grey clouds, enveloped her. The applause from the board and Miguel's trust in her abilities refracted back her journey. How far she had come from that moment of anxiety-drenched uncertainty. She had conquered not just the skepticism within the boardroom, but within herself, emerging as a leader filled with passion and poise. Walking out, she glanced back at Miguel. "Thank you for believing in this vision," she said genuinely. He nodded, acknowledging her growth. But as the realization of her personal achievement dawned, she recognized the weight of the responsibility now resting on her shoulders. This was her moment, but it was only the beginning. Real change wasn't merely about launching initiatives. It required maintaining momentum and fostering collaborations that translated vision into reality. Turning her gaze to the bustling office space beyond the glass doors, Sarah envisioned a future built on trust and ethics, where every employee felt empowered and engaged, a community of thinkers and doers reshaping the industry from their inherent values. The urgency to act surged within her. She had to nurture this newfound relationship with the board and ensure that the vision transcended her role. The road ahead sprawled before her, filled with challenges, triumphs, and most importantly, an opportunity for her to embody the leader her mother always believed she could be. Tuning out the noise of apprehension, she embraced the task ahead. Sarah was not just on a path of transformation for herself. She aimed to change the lives of everyone within the company. It was time to build something extraordinary. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your own journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support the momentum that fuels our community. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about the ending. Your perspective matters here. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Together, we can uplift each other in the pursuit of remarkable change.